Hey, this module is a guide to the equipment you need to produce music, focusing in this session on the absolute minimum setup, and then looking at recommended upgrades and considerations for those with larger budgets or other requirements in subsequent sections. So let's start with the most essential item, and that's a computer, and ideally one as powerful as you can afford. We'll look at specs in a moment. You can't really get round this. You can make music without a computer, of course, by using apps on a phone or tablet, or using different hardware instruments. I actually did a festival set once with purely hardware, with 2 Novation circuits and an X station, which you can also find on YouTube. However, if you want to produce as well as perform, and then also easily export, upload, and manage your creations, then a computer is kind of necessary right now. So a PC or Mac, desktop or laptop is preferable. Whether you go for a laptop or not is essentially down to the portability aspect. If you think you'll be making music on the move or in other locations, or wanting to perform live sets, then a laptop is a better way to go, so you're not limited to only producing in your studio. As you probably know already, PCs are generally more affordable, but come with more of a variability in standards with so many different manufacturers to choose from. Macs are more expensive, but you know exactly what you're going to get. And you also have some exclusive options when it comes to media applications, with things like GarageBand and Logic Pro only being available on Macs, for instance. Next up then, music making software. Once you've got your computer, you obviously need software on the computer to produce music with. Now, before we get into purchasable stuff, let's look at free options, as there are actually a number of free music making platforms online, with Amped Studio being an example of one that's maybe not so well known, but is fully featured. So if you're interested in trying things out on a very tight budget, then that's definitely worth a look. The previously mentioned GarageBand is also free. It only comes with Macs and isn't available for PCs, but is a very nice and user-friendly way to play around and see if production might be your bag. If you have some budget to work with though, my personal recommendation would be to just dive straight in with a more powerful application and get to know it gradually. Digital audio workstations, or DAWs as they're often called, such as Ableton Live or Logic Pro, are 2 great examples with their own unique features, which I'll discuss in a separate video. Ableton Live is the one I know best and therefore recommend the most, and it's still available as a 90-day free trial. So you get it completely free for 3 months, which is a huge amount of time to get to know it and get a feel for production. Just to come back to computer specs for a minute though, as we didn't look at them before, a good place to get a minimum computer spec is the website of the music software that you want to use. For instance, on Ableton's website, it tells you that for Live 11, you'll need at least an i5 or comparable processor, which is the computer's CPU, so how powerful it is, along with 8GB of RAM, which is random access memory, so how much data it can hold in memory that it can quickly access. By today's standards, these are pretty low specs though, so even quite an old computer should deliver these specs fairly easily. Next up, headphones. Now some people might jump straight to speakers here, but I would personally prioritize some good headphones over them. The reason being they're more affordable, more portable, private, and can be used for other situations like DJing, for example. In terms of what headphones to get, then it's kind of a preference thing, so try some out if you can, but there are a lot of different manufacturers that make really good ones. I've personally been a fan of Sennheiser and Beyerdynamic over the years. I actually used this pair of Sennheiser HD25s for both DJing and producing when I first started out, even though they're supposed to be more for DJing than producing, and I got really used to their sound, which is a big part of it when making music, so I could produce pretty well with them. Nowadays I use these Beyerdynamic DT1770 Pros, which are really nice high-end ones and great for bass music in particular, but I wouldn't recommend starting out with these, as you can work up to them later on. Beyerdynamic do a much cheaper pair called DT240 Pros, for instance, which should be nice for starting out. AKG are another quality brand, so are another one to check out. So this would actually be where I would stop as the minimum production setup, which is a computer, some music software, and a decent-ish pair of headphones. You can get pretty far with just that and nothing else. So considering the fact that you may already own a computer, that Ableton Live is free for 90 days, and that you can get a fairly good pair of headphones for as cheap as £50, then you don't necessarily need too huge a budget when starting out. If you don't own a computer though, you're looking at a minimum cost of maybe £500 or so for a new PC, and that could even be a laptop, or around £800 for a new Mac. That's the cheapest one you can get, which is a Mac Mini. Laptops start from around £1,000 or so for the MacBook Air. Ableton Live is free at first, but then around £250 for the standard version after the 3-month trial ends, or £420 or so for the Suite version, which comes with all of their software instruments, which I would recommend going for if you can afford it, and then around £50 for the headphones. So that gives you a range of £300 or so at the lower end if you already have a computer, or £800 if you don't, although you could take this down a fair bit by going second-hand of course, and up to £1,500 plus at the upper end, depending on what computer you go for. And you have a bit of time to pay for the software, don't forget, so that could help with spreading out the cost if you need. In terms of other kit, it kind of depends on the specifics of your setup. So what you want to produce, if you want to record things, if you have any instrumental skills, and so on. So I'll go into those areas in the next lesson on equipment upgrades. What I will say though is a good habit to get into is to work with whatever you have. It's much healthier and more creative to make what you have work, which can be relatively little, rather than always thinking you just need that next thing to be able to achieve your goal. It is a prevalent issue in a lot of areas of our lives, always thinking we need more. And I don't want to discourage you from ever having the excitement that you can get when a new instrument or bit of kit comes out, as that can be a big part of it for a lot of people. But I just recommend leaning more towards a minimal approach in terms of kit, and just a belief in the knowledge that anything's possible, even with very few resources, especially if you really know how to use them. In the next lesson though, we'll get onto other bits of kit like controllers, interfaces, microphones, speakers, and soundproofing, including the various reasons why they're not on my absolute essentials list for beginners. So I'll see you then. This lesson is from a completely free course on the absolute basics of music production, to help a total beginner get started, so that when you first start getting into producing, you've got a good understanding of the kinds of concepts and terminology that you'll be coming across. To gain access to the course, just use the provided link, which will take you to Producertech.com, where you can create a free account and then get instant access to the course without any further obligations. So enjoy the course, and I hope it gets you off to the best start possible.